Switching gears from the for loop to the while loop. The while loop is used when you have an indefinite number of iterations, could be 0, 1, or even many. And these will continue to execute until the condition that you supply them is false. So you can think of these like if statements. As long as it keeps being true, the loop will continue to execute. As soon as it's false, we skip over it and we move on. So, here's the most basic form of a while loop. Let's say we have a variable x and that equals 10. While x is greater, I'll do x greater than 0, print x. Let's actually modify this a little bit. Let's turn this into input. Int input. Enter a number. And now the user will enter a number, and then we'll print it all the way down to 1, effectively doing a countdown. So let's click over to our command line, and we're going to CLS. We're going to run it again, enter a number. Let's say 12. And I have screwed up badly. If this ever happens, if you make a mistake like this and it starts executing infinitely, hit Control-C and you will stop it. That was a mistake, but it's one that it's good to show. So x minus equals 1. So now our loop won't go on forever and ever and ever and ever. So again, CLS, enter a number, we'll say 12, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's much better. Just remember with a while loop, it is entirely possible to get an infinite loop. This is bad. Either your loop has to have some condition that breaks out of the loop, or it has to have a condition that will eventually be false. And in order to do that, you might have to do something like this at the end of your loop. This is very, very, very common. So, let's change this a little bit. We're going to keep this here, but we're going to do something different. So, we'll reuse x. We'll say int, input, enter a number. And we're going to use this to create a factorial. Now, what is a factorial? This is a mathematical operation in which we take the product of every number from 1 to x. So, if you do a factorial 10, that would be 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5 times 6 times 7 times 8 times 9 times 10. And then you would get your result. Obviously, we can reverse that. And instead of going from 1 to our number, we can go from our number to 1. And that's exactly how we're going to do this. So, we've got our result equals 1. Actually, instead of result, we'll call this factorial. Factorial, which is a function. I cannot do that. Apparently, it's a function. Is it? No, it shouldn't be. Let's see, if I open this... No, it's fine. It's fine. It was just auto-completing it. Okay, never mind. False alarm. So, we have x is an int input. Tells us to enter a number. We have factorial is 1. Now, while x is greater than 1... we want to say factorial, make sure I've got it written right, yep, times equals x. And what this is going to do is it's effectively the same as saying factorial equals factorial times x. So on our first iteration, we were doing factorial times equals 10. We're then going to x minus equals 1. So then our second iteration, now x is 9. Is that greater than 1? Of course it is. So factorial then times equals 9. Decrease by 1, Is it still greater? Yep, it's 8. So factorial times equals 8. And we're going to keep doing this and keep doing this until we reach x equals 2, where we'll then do factorial times equals 2, x minus equals 1, down to 1. This condition now fails. And then we exit the loop. And now we're going to print factorial. Save it, run it after a CLS. We're just going to say 1. And now we enter another number. Let's go for something crazy, 15. And that's going to give us this ridiculous number here. Do I know what it is? Let's see. 1,000, million, billion. It is about 1.3 trillion. And that is 15 factorial. Let's run it again and see it in action with a smaller number. I'm just going to enter 1 for this, and we'll say 5, and this should be 120. Correct. So, that is the common ways that you're going to see a while loop. You're going to see some condition. You're going to have your code that the function does at each iteration, and it may or may not be integrated into that code, but you have something to move you toward your terminating condition, which would, in our case, be x is less than or equal to 1. So just remember that a while loop repeats until the supplied condition is no longer true. And if you should accidentally create an infinite loop like I did, remember in your command prompt, if it doesn't automatically terminate it for you and detect the infinite loop, hold Control, press C, and that'll stop it. That is a forced stop inside your command prompt. So, that's while loops. There are some other ways you can use them, like for reading files or database queries or strings in general, but we will see more of those as we go along, particularly when we start talking about lists. We'll be using for loops and while loops and all this other stuff to make our code more robust, and we may see while loops being used for things like files or strings. But this is going to do us for right now. I want you only to understand the most basic forms of the while loop. The others can get pretty advanced pretty fast. So, when we come back, we're going to look at the do while loop, what that looks like in Python, what makes it different from do while loops in other languages, particularly because there is no do while command. We have to make one ourselves. So, stay tuned for that.